Good evening. Welcome to APTN National News. I'm Savannah Kelly. The Shaw South Nation in British Columbia says researchers have found 40 unmarked graves at the former St. Augustine's residential school. APTN's Tina House spoke to one survivor who went to the school.
Earlier this week, the Shishelt First Nation near Shishelt, BC, announced that they discovered 40 unmarked graves. Very troubling discovery, as we've seen many of these unmarked graves being discovered right across the country. Joining me today is Deborah Baker. Deborah, you were a former student at that residential school as well as your family. Can you tell us about your experience there?
So yes, I was there in the early 70s with my older brother Richie and my younger brother Matthew and my uncle Wesley, my auntie Roberta, and my auntie Mavis, and it was tough. There's no doubt about it. Like, we were separated from the boys' side to the girls' side, and we didn't get a chance to really mingle as a family, I guess you could say. But we knew we were all family, and my grandfather lived on the waterfront reserve there, and when he'd walk by, I'd run up to him and ask him for money. But it was like, it honestly felt like we were segregated from the rest of the community and even from our family members.
Deb, some very troubling news this week coming out of the community there. What were your first thoughts when you heard that 40 graves have been discovered so far?
I was definitely heartbroken. Last week when I addressed the Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, I didn't realize at that time how many or who, but I found out just a few days ago that I had an uncle who was my grandfather's brother named Simon, and that my grandfather had written to the priest in 1935 about where is my brother Simon, and so it just couldn't stop crying. I just felt so emotional. The thought of my great-grandmother Molly Ann not knowing where her child is or what had happened, nothing as far as I know, and there's still more information to gather to find out about that. But not only that, the other 39 plus families, I'm sure that the investigation's continuing, and so there may be more, but across the country, when I think about all these residential schools and the children who didn't make it home, my heart goes out to all their families, and you know, it's just heartbreaking. And here you're at a school, you're at a school and this is happening, and it wasn't a school. That's, as far as I'm concerned, it wasn't a school.
Absolutely, Deb. Our hearts go out to you and the entire community in this latest news. Take care of yourself, and thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Back to you in studio.
The National Indian Residential School Crisis Line is available for survivors and others who might need support. That number is 1-866-925-4419. Are there unmarked graves on the grounds of the McGill University in Montreal? We should soon find out. A group of women from the Kahnawake Mohawk territory near Montreal have stopped construction of a new medical facility until it can be determined if there are unmarked graves on the site. Amelia Fournier has the story.
The number of lawyers that were in court today, and you people stood up and spoke and asked for the simple truth. We are behind you.
Hans Dibka is hoping the Mohawk mothers of Kahnawake, the Kanien'kehá:ka Kanistansera, have brought him closer to getting answers about his mother's treatment at the Allen Memorial Institute at the hands of Dr. Ewan Cameron in the 1950s. Cameron's American CIA and Canadian-funded psych experiments that involved high doses of LSD, electroshock therapy, and sleep deprivation left patients forever changed, and some, the Kanistansera allege, never returned. The Kanistansera think that bodies of Indigenous children may have been buried there too. They came to a court-supported agreement with McGill and the Quebec Infrastructure Society, or SQI, to examine the grounds for human remains before works can begin on the grounds of the old Royal Victoria Hospital.
We as people, not as an organization, we as people, we hold inherent rights, and that is what allowed us to keep going forward. If we're representing an entity of Canada, it's a conflict of interest.
It set legal precedent. The Kanistansera are not affiliated with a band council, but they exerted their rights over Kanien'kehá:ka territory without lawyers.
All Native people throughout Canada have their own way, and they can approach the court, and they don't even need a lawyer. They can do it themselves.
Judge Gregory Moore of Quebec's Superior Court issued an injunction to halt construction at the old hospital in October. Now that the agreement is established, the injunction is lifted, and a panel of expert archaeologists selected by all parties will determine how digs will proceed. Kanien'kehá:ka cultural monitors will also be present on site during archaeological works. The agreement also compels McGill, the Feds, and McGill University Health Center to expedite release of records relating to the Allen Memorial experiments.
This is a model capable of being followed, a model of reconciliation and trust building. But at the heart, it has to be about the children.
Lana Ponting, one of the only remaining living survivors of the experiments, wore a ribbon skirt given to her by the Augustines to share her story during the hearing.
Isn't it beautiful?
She has testified that she witnessed people digging what she presumes to be graves at night, and that she saw Indigenous people of all ages being subject to Dr. Cameron's brutal experimentation.
People need to know the truth. And I do want the Prime Minister of Canada to do a public inquiry. It's time.
While evidence of unmarked graves on McGill grounds is circumstantial, it was enough for Canada's Special Interlocutor on Missing Children and Unmarked Graves to get involved. Julian Falconer, the interlocutor's legal representative, said institutions are unlikely to consider allegations of unmarked graves.
In each case, and the Special Interlocutor speaks to this, there is a discernible, sad but understandable level of denialism.
In an email statement to APTN, the SQI said, in French, they were, quote, very happy to announce the signature of this agreement that will permit to shine a light on the allegations of the presence of unmarked graves. And McGill called the agreement, quote, an unprecedented collaboration. Amelia Fournier, APTN National News, Montreal.
A parliamentary committee heard from sex work advocates about how decriminalization, not more regulation, is the best way to prevent violence against women, girls, and gender-diverse people. APTN's Leanne Sanders reports.
We don't even have the legitimacy to work and to create good working conditions for ourselves. So what I'm interested in, and I think a lot of people on this committee are interested in, is figuring out how we avoid more serial killers going after sex workers, how we avoid people, exploiters and abusers, hearing the message that government is sending them, that is to say, sex workers are a good victim for you because you will not be caught. You can be violent against sex workers because we also want to eradicate them.
Sandra Wesley is from a Montreal nonprofit that fights for the rights of sex workers. She says sex work needs to be more clearly defined as work, and more distinction between those trafficked and those working would help. Wesley was one of two presenters at the Committee on the Status of Women. She says violence against sex workers should be prosecuted as sexual assault and not trafficking. That would bring the trafficking numbers down. Kate Sinclair of the Sex Workers of Winnipeg Action Coalition agrees and says more lawmaking around sex work is not the answer.
This may surprise you, but people aren't excited to go to prison for reporting workplace violence. Sex workers have been supporting our communities while criminalized for a long time. We're often the first to see when something is wrong, but if we get arrested, exposed to further surveillance, or even just written off when we come forward, it's not going to work. Start with decriminalization of sex work, immigration status for migrant sex workers, affordable housing, guaranteed basic livable income so people can make choices about the work that they do.
The testimony yesterday, along with written submissions, will go into the committee's final report to the government. May 5th is the deadline for mailed submissions. Leanne Sanders, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
We need to step aside for a short break. Still to come, the family of a Saskatchewan man currently on life support has gotten some high-profile help. Welcome back to APTN National News. The family of a Saskatchewan man currently on life support has gotten some high-profile help. the Federation of Indigenous Nations held a press conference to express support for the man who was beaten and tased by police in Prince Albert. APTN's Brent McGill was there.
Bowden Umferville is currently on life support with no brain activity in a Saskatoon hospital as a result of an incident with Prince Albert Police Service on April 1st. The 40-year-old was a passenger in a car stopped by police around 2:20 a.m. as part of a stolen vehicle investigation. Videos of the incident were circulated on social media by witnesses and were provided to the Federation of Sovereign Indigenous Nations. Verna Umferville is the man's mother.
I just hope this will never happen to any mother, what I have to go through. It should never happen.
Yeah, should never have to go through this, mother.
Yes. I'm so sad, my heart's broken for my son. And I don't know why their badges aren't taken from them.
Umferville was in the driver's seat while the vehicle's registered owner was in the back seat with other occupants, having never reported the vehicle stolen. The video shows the Prince Albert Police Service using their tasers more than once, physically striking Bowden several times, using pepper spray and a baton.
He went long without oxygen, 20 minutes.
Yeah.
You know, they didn't resuscitate him. They just waited for the ELMs to come there to revive him. And they tased him so much, like they're supposed to try to revive him. That's their job after they use the tasers, we were told. And I just don't know why. They just watched him.
Yeah, tased him and they beat him.
Yeah.
They broke both his orbital bones. He's suffered a laceration above his eye, on the top of his head.
Stitches all over.
Stitches this way all over.
Umferville's family says he will soon be taken off life support machines, as the physicians also provided the opinion that Umferville's current state is the result of a 20-minute period where his heart stopped beating before he was being revived.
There has been a serious lack of communication on on the condition of their loved one. And so we continue to advocate on their behalf as well, and we will assist them in finding those answers. And we want to as well acknowledge that there's a lot of good police officers in the city of Prince Albert. But this incident, it shatters the confidence of all of the officers, good and not so good, in the city of Prince Albert, and that's unfortunate.
All of the officers involved in the incident remain assigned to their regular duties while the matter is investigated by the Serious Incident Response Team.
They're going to be accountable for their actions. I believe we should have our own justice police office force. I think First Nations should have that.
Brent McGill, APTN National News, Saskatoon.
Our Truth in Politics panel is back. Eagle Feather News editor Carrie Benjo is in Regina. Negan Sinclair of the Winnipeg Free Press is here in town. Dennis spoke to the panel earlier about police violence.
Carrie, Negan, thanks for being with us as always. Carrie, I'll put this question to you first. Bear with me as I read off some numbers here, but according to the Canadian Civil Liberties Association, Black people who make up 3.8% of the total population make up 8.1% of police-involved deaths. And while 5.1% of people in Canada are Indigenous, they make up 16.2% of people killed in police-involved deaths. Carrie, why do you think these numbers are so high?
Well, it's simple. Brown people, people of color, are seen as other. So when there are encounters that do happen, the police aren't so quick to understand the situation. Indigenous people are seen as violent, they're scary. And so this viewpoint of Indigenous and Black people, it impacts how they are treated within the justice system and how they are treated by police. And no amount of people saying this doesn't exist. The numbers prove it time and time again. It's Indigenous people that suffer, Indigenous people that suffer the worst. It is something that needs to be taken care of, and it has to do with creating a conversation about understanding Indigenous and Black people and treating them as human beings.
Niigaan, you know, we've anecdotally always heard this, but is it important, do you think, now to have the data to really back it up?
Yeah, I mean, the data is quite straightforward and it paints a pretty damning picture. I'll give some more statistics here. It is 5 times more likely for you, if you are an Indigenous woman, to experience violence. Indigenous girls and women and Two-Spirit people experience violence exponentially more. And also, if you are in an Indigenous community or an Indigenous community which you are the majority population, you are over-policed 7 to 8 times more. The fact is that policing is really an issue. And one of the most important things around policing is that the reaction of police and the training of police is fairly inadequate. I mean, it's not suitable any further to have awareness sessions when it's really an issue of misrepresentation and the ability for police officers to handle situations that they are thrust into when they frankly don't understand what's going on when it comes to the history of Indigenous peoples. And what I always tell police is that when you show up in a community, you are not thought of as a helper, you're thought of as a herder. And so that means that police officers, frankly, are not adequately prepared to go into these situations. And oftentimes, as a result, that's why we see so many of these deaths. You know, Manitoba last year had the highest amount of Indigenous homicides on record. And it isn't just at the hands of those in communities, it's also in situations involving incarceration.
Carrie, both you and Niigaan have touched on training here, but what can be done to reverse this trend, to reduce the numbers of Black and Indigenous people killed by police?
Like I said, it's humanizing the community. I think officers that are accepted into a community know what they need to do. We have RCMP officers that become a part of the community and they don't have issues because they make the extra effort to get to know the people that they're policing as people. They know how to judge a situation. That doesn't happen in these larger cities, in these larger places. There is an acceptance by the police services to treat Indigenous people and to treat Black people and treat brown people as the other. And it's okay to treat them the way they do because no one really does anything about it. Indigenous people are the only ones standing up and demanding justice. We don't see politicians, white politicians, coming forward and saying, you know, this needs to change. We need to do something. It's always the Indigenous people, Black people pushing for change. It doesn't come from the top down. It comes from the grassroots people.
Niigaan, just this week alone, we're hearing of cases involving alleged, incidents with police and Indigenous peoples in Manitoba, Saskatchewan, the Yukon, Kenora, Thunder Bay, all just in the last 4 days. Are these incidents on the rise, do you think, or are Indigenous peoples maybe feeling more confident in speaking out?
Yeah, I think it's also a mixture of both, but I totally agree, and we left Northwest Ontario where we saw some officers currently. I mean, we can't forget the situation of Thunder Bay. Much has been written about that situation out there as well. I mean, the reality is that, people have smartphones, people have abilities, social media. I mean, there's other ways for Indigenous people to tell our stories, so perhaps we're hearing more about this. But I also think that it's a reality in which things that have happened in the past were perhaps not thought of as police brutality or violence. And nowadays, people are much more versed on their rights. They're much more versed on the inadequate training that police officers are getting. And then, as Carrie pointed out, the fact that leadership really has left behind Indigenous peoples in this regard. I mean, we do have lots of non-Indigenous peoples who have said various things over the years, but perhaps not consistently in the same ways that Indigenous leaders have. And certainly for those who are in this issue, writing about this issue continually, barely a day goes by that my inbox doesn't get a story from a mother or from a person who has been arrested or a person who has had a brutal experience with police officers in our community. So this has almost become a situation of a national epidemic of violence, and it's often led by the very forces that we're supposed to protect.
Yeah, it could be a full beat for a reporter. Carrie and Egon, we'll have to leave it there, but thanks as always to you both.
Yeah, miigwech, thanks.
We need to take one more short break. Coming up, one of our very own APTN journalists wins gold at the Atlantic Journalism Awards. Welcome back. Time now for our photo of the day. Cheryl McDonald shared this photo of the rising waters along the Ottawa River at Oka-Gonassatage in South Quebec. Cheryl calls this photo Land, Water, and Sky Spirits United. Thanks, Cheryl. For the chance to be our next photo of the day, send your photos by email to share@aptn.ca. Now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. Starting on the East Coast, we've got 3 degrees in St. John's, 8 degrees in Charlottetown. Kuujjuaq, 5 degrees, Nain, 2 degrees and snow. Val-d'Or, 7 degrees, Chibougamau, 11 degrees and some rain. Sarnia, 12 degrees, North Bay, 11 degrees, some rain there as well. Kapuskasing, 4 degrees and snow, Big Trout Lake, -1. Churchill, -4, God's Lake, +1 and some sun there. Winnipeg, sunny and 6 degrees, Barons River, 1 degree. Regina, -1, North Battleford, mix of sun and cloud, 4 degrees. Stony Rapids, 9 degrees, Lorange, sunny and 8 degrees. Fort Chip, 9 degrees, Fort McMurray, 11 degrees and sunshine. Red Deer, snowy, 4 degrees, Edmonton, +11. Kamloops, 14 degrees, Canal, 11 degrees and sunny. Fort Nelson, sunshine, 10 degrees, Dease Lake, 7 degrees. Dawson, 6 degrees, Rock River, -5. Yellowknife, 6 degrees, Fort Simpson, 12 degrees and sunshine. Paulatuck, -11, Sax Harbor, -15 and sunny. Baker Lake, -3, Cambridge Bay, -12 and snow. Clyde River, -2, Igloolik, -9 and sunny. Our own Angel Moore won gold at the Atlantic Journalism Awards this week. Moore took home the Breaking/Spot News Award for a September 2021 story on Assembly of First Nations Chief Roseanne Archibald and the Mi'kmaq Treaty fishery. The chief was on a Mi'kmaq fishing vessel being surrounded by officials from the Department of Fisheries and Oceans. This is Moore's second AGA award. Congrats, Angel. And that's all the time we have for your Friday news. For news anytime, visit our website at aptnnews.ca. I'm Savannah Kelly, and from all of us here at APTN National News, Marcy, miigwech, and thank you for watching. Have a great night.